Hey, what's going on, everybody? Back with another how-to. Today we're going to be doing the front wheel hub bearing on this 2009 Nissan Pathfinder. Now this should fall in line with any third gen Pathfinder, which is 2005 to 2012. So let's get into it now. Alright guys, we're here on the driver's side, although this process is going to be the same for either the passenger or the driver, but in this case the driver bearing is what is failing. So, good way you can tell if you have a bad bearing. Obviously, you know, a lot of times you can hear it, but usually when you're hearing it, it's pretty bad. It's to a point where you're probably noticing it by checking what I want to show you pretty easily. But I just did a few jobs on this vehicle, and upon inspecting it and doing everything, I found some play in this front wheel bearing. So you can grab pretty much in the treads, go right at 12 o'clock, and I don't know if you can hear it, but yeah, she's got a little bit of play in her, so it's not tight. And if we go do this on the other side, it is stiff and tight, and it should, you know, almost bounce you back. So like I said, that's a good way to tell. A lot of times if they're really bad, it'll be really prominent. You almost see the wheel rocking back and forth. So that's just a good way to, you know, go ahead and test it, guys. I like grabbing it dead center and just, you hear it. Yeah, that's it. That's a bad bearing, guys. So this thing is loose, has play. So let's go ahead and get the wheel off and get this thing replaced. All right, guys. So first thing, of course, is we need to remove the wheel and get the wheel off. So the lug nuts are a 21 mil. So got a 21 mil here on an impact. And we're just going to go ahead and fire all 6 of these right out. All right, guys, wheel is off. So really all this job is going to consist of, it's basically doing a brake job, but taking it one step further and removing the wheel hub, essentially, is what it comes down to. Okay, so we're going to start by disassembling the brakes. So let's go ahead and get into that now. So the first step here, and something I like to do anytime I'm disassembling anything like this, or brakes or what have you, I like to turn the wheel. So as you see, it locked up on me, but I want to go turn the wheel with the key turned inside of the car. We're going to turn the wheel all the way the opposite way to gain a bunch of space behind here, so we have a bunch of access to remove what we need to without having to fight tools and get all cramped up in there. So let's go ahead and turn the wheel. All right, guys, so you can see we have the wheel turned. Now we have a ton more space here to access these bolts, whether you're using a socket wrench or impact or whatever tool of choice that you choose. So just makes it a lot easier to get everything and get access to it. So let's go ahead and start with getting this caliper off. It is held in with 2 14 millimeter bolts. We got one here, one here. Just have a 14 on an impact. 1, 2. All right, get both of these out. So there is our 14 mils. And now the caliper, if you rock it back and forth, should slide right up and off. Okay, so there's our caliper. And what we're going to do is just go ahead and rest it right here on the knuckle itself, you know, out of our work way for now with no obstructions. Okay, so I'll get it out of our way. Just be careful, make sure it's stable, not going to fall and put a ton of strain on that hose. The hose has a little bit of strain on it, but it looks worse than it is. So actually it fell a little bit. That's actually even in a better position. Now what we're going to do is get these pads out. They do have these retainer clamps on them, so you can just pop them right out. Should be one on the top, one on the bottom. They look like V's, and then the pads should be able to pop right out. All right, so now we have the pads out, and we're good to go ahead and remove our caliper bracket now. All right, so our caliper bracket is held in with 2 19 millimeter bolts. Okay, so I have a 19 mil here on an impact. Should be able to fire these right out. And I got that one started on the top. I want to get the bottom one all the way out. All right, there's our bottom one. And just keep in mind, once you have this bolt out of the bracket, it is then free at that point, and it will fall off. So that's why I kind of left it in place. Make sure my caliper is good, not going to fall. I'm going to go ahead and fire the remaining of that 19 out on the bracket. So there's that. Now I have control of the bracket, can fully remove it, not let it hit the ground. Okay, and then we have our rotor here, and all we gotta do now is get our rotor off. All right guys, I actually relocated the caliper to the upper control arm, so not a lot of tension on the hose, pushed it up there. As long as I'm not banging and hitting around or doing anything crazy, I don't think that's going anywhere. Seems stable, out of our workway, out of sight, out of mind. Now we can go ahead and get our rotor off. Now technically the rotor should be free like this. It should slide right off, but most of the time it is rust welded to the hub in here, and you're gonna have to hit it with something in order to free it up. So obviously, if you don't want to damage your rotor, you want to take something like a rubber dead blow. You can use a 3 or 4 pound rubber dead blow. What you would do is just do some light controlled blows around the rotor. Do, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6. It should free it up, and it'll get it to this point where it's loose, and then you can slide it right off. All right, so should be pretty straightforward. Just give it some controlled blows, and then if it's rust welded to the hub, it should come right out, guys. So there we go, guys. Brakes are fully disassembled. Now it's just a matter of getting our hub bolts out and getting the hub off. All right, so we have 4 17mm hub bolts holding this bad boy in. So one on each side, at one corner, one corner, one corner, and then there's the other one. So that's all 4 of the 17 mils holding in this hub. And we can also see them on this side, and they look pretty rusty, and they don't look like they want to come out easily. So most of the times with hub bolts like this that I encounter, especially here in the Northeast, they're usually typically rusted, and they need a little bit more persuasion than just putting an impact or, you know, a big socket wrench or something like that. So to ease these out, I'm going to hit them with a little bit of heat. Now I'm not going to go crazy. We're just going to take a map torch, put a little bit of heat right here from the front, and then we're going to go ahead and crack those loose and back out our 17 mil retainer bolts. Okay, so I'll get that set up. I'll show you what we're going to do, and we'll get these things out. All right guys, so we're going to go ahead and persuade these with a little bit of heat. And you know, if this hasn't been taken apart or it's really rusted and bad, you might even have had to do this or have to do this for the bracket bolts as well. So all I have is a map torch here, nothing fancy. Just take the end of the flame and just put it right at that bolt. Probably sit on it for about a minute to a minute and a half. And then once that thing's nice and warm, we're going to go ahead and back it. Alright guys, got that thing toasty for about a minute. And no effort, guys. That's why you do this. Look at that. Coming right off. So to make that easy on ourselves, let's put a little bit of heat for some persuasion. You don't have to be nervous about doing this. Obviously keep it away from components that will burn, you know, rubber or anything like that. But obviously if we just heat it up right here from the front, we're not near anything that it can damage. It's all metal, good to go. I think I got this thing out. It's gonna be hot. I really don't want to touch it, but let me get it out of here. And there she is. There it is, guys. First bolt out. We're just going to do the same thing for the other 3. And then we'll have all 4 of our hub bolts out. Alright guys, got that bottom one a little toasty. There we go. Broke it right free. Same deal. So I'm going to go ahead and back this one out. And then we just have to get the 2 on the other side. You might have to turn the wheel the opposite way to get better access to those 2. But same deal, guys. You can back them out, put a little bit of heat, but 17 mil. Go ahead and get these guys right out. Once they free up, they all but come out by hand. So there we go, guys. All right guys, we got all 4 hub bolts out. All I did for the other side is turn the wheel the opposite way like I mentioned, and I just had easy access right here to get those 2 out as well. So all 4 17 mils are out. We do have one more step here before we go ahead and try to get this hub off, and that is the speed sensor wire right here. Now it is held in right here with the Allen key, but I believe most, if not all, these days come with a new one already installed. The one that we got, the Moog, which I will review in a minute, that does have the sensor already built in, so we don't have to worry about taking it out from here. We're just going to go ahead and remove it from the harness. Okay, so this is held in with rubber grommets basically, so we can just go ahead and work them out of the bracket here. All right, and that's freed up there. And there's one right in the inner part here. Just gotta push that out. There we go. And then the harness is right there, that gray harness. So we're gonna go ahead and get that gray harness unplugged. All right, guys, I'm gonna tell you from experience, I've done some hubs on Titans and Xterras, and these gray freaking harnesses, usually from being in this spot in the wheel well, they are just always in there and do not want to come out. So let's see if we can persuade this thing out here. All right, guys, so this thing is fighting me as expected, so I'm pulling it off of its mount here. You can also try to pull this out with a panel popper. I tried that and it loosened it up for the you know, to slide it over. So if you can see, it's kind of coming apart, but the corrosion and whatever keeps these things stuck together, dirt, corrosion, all the above, it just like welds it together. So I just have a panel popper here, and I want to try to like push them separate, because if you can see, they are coming apart. It just needs a little bit of persuasion to come out. Yeah, it inched its way a hair. Yeah, you can see it's coming out, guys. See how it's coming out? So I just got to keep working at it until it decides it wants to fully unlatch itself here. So it's a hell of a process. This is one of the hardest parts of the job, to be honest. Just getting this damn thing out without destroying it. All right, guys, I'm just going to keep working at it, and I should be able to separate that. But, you know, just know that you might be fighting this harness, and you just got to keep, you know, carefully, persistently working at it to separate it. All right, guys, just saying persistent with it. I think I got it. Whoo, man, these things, I tell you, every time. You can even see the kind of the corrosion in there. This is just welds them together. Like, getting these apart, it's every time it's a fight. But there we go, guys, that is out. So got the whole wire here free, and then once we pull this hub off, it should be able to just creep right out of the dust shield here. So let's go ahead and turn the wheel straight and we'll get this hub out. Now, guys, we got that harness completely free. We do have one more step here staring us right in the face before we can get the hub off, and that is our axle nut. So it does have a cotter pin on there, so we're going to have to get that cotter pin off. I just have some snips here. All right, and you could reuse the cotter pin. So if you're planning on reusing it, try not to chew it up, of course. If I do manage to chew this up, I have a box full of them, so I'm not really concerned about it, but just be prepared that you will need a cotter pin if you chew this up. So there we go, she is coming out. There we go, guys, cotter pin is out, and now we just have to get that axle nut off. So the axle nut, it's going to be on there. If you don't have an impact, I would suggest getting one, borrowing one, something, because doing an axle nut manually, you're going to be upset with yourself. So the axle nut, 32 mil. So what I'm going to do is grab an impact, and we're going to fire that axle nut right off. All right, guys, 32 mil. And that's why you want to impact, because it took 2 seconds opposed to jumping on a breaker bar trying to break it free. All right, so there we go, guys. Now, if you're lucky and you know you're in the south somewhere, or this car's garage kept, or somewhere pretty and nice, this might be free and the hub might just fall out. But I'm gonna say that it's a 9.9.9 chance that it's probably not going to just come off with the release of the axle nut. And the bolts, it's probably going to be rust welded to the knuckle. As you can see, this thing is perfectly on here. And you know, you could try prying it out. You know, if you had a huge pry bar, or you know, something to try to start prying on this, you do got to be careful of the dust shield. But yeah, guys, this thing is just, you know, rust welded. It's not going to come off easily. So there is a tool we're going to use to get this off easily and not fight with it, and I want to grab it now and I'll show you what it is. All right, guys, so here's what we're going to utilize to get this hub off easily and efficiently. It is a slide hammer. You can rent these from your local parts store. I rented this right from AutoZone for 46 bucks. It's 27033 OEM slide hammer. So if you go in and give them the 27033 or the 57033 part number, you should get this. And how this works is we take this Should find its way around a few of these studs here, hopefully. The fact that it's a 6 lug might make this a little complicated here. Alright guys, so I'm trying to push this axle back in the middle of here so I can get a grip with some lug nuts on this thing to get it started here. You just need a few threads on each side. If I can get it started, it should work. This is really ideally meant for front wheel drive CV axles and you know, like 4 or 5 lug cars, but I think we can make it happen. I'm just snugging these on by hand. Should be able to thread the end of the slide hammer in here, and I should be able to get this thing pulled without a ton of obstruction, guys. So it is pushing our axle back a hair. I think that's good. Just want to make it look even. Looks about even to me. One more turn over there. All right, that looks good, guys. So we're gonna go ahead, get this end threaded in. We'll set it up and try to pull this thing on out. All right, so here is the setup. Should be able to go ahead and escort this thing off with the amount of threads I got right now. We should be good, but I'll go ahead and put the camera down. I'll let you guys see it firsthand, and we'll see if we can get this thing off. All right, guys, let's see what we got here. It's freeing up a hair. Oh man, she is on here. Relocate the caliper down here because I heard it slipping and sliding, so to prevent that from falling everywhere, let's see if we can get it right there. She's coming a little bit, guys. I think what I'm gonna do is try to spin the attack spots. I think our lug nuts are coming loose too, which isn't helping. It's weird that axle was preventing it. Now it's like found its way to seat back in there, so we can get these lug nuts tight. In fact, I'm gonna go ahead and snug them in as far as they want to go. That way we don't have to mess around with this. And a couple more pulls of this thing, I'm hoping should get it off. Yeah, okay, so let's see. Just gonna need a couple more pulls. There it is. Good Lord. That thing was on there, guys. And this is all that rust. All that is what's holding that thing together. So it took a good four minutes, I would say, to get that off. I was really fighting it. And that was with the slide hammer. So imagine if I was just trying to hit it off with a regular hammer or prying it. I mean, we would have been here all day, guys. So if it's rust welded, just go get the slide hammer. It'll save you a ton of time and headache and busted knuckles. All right, so we'll go ahead and get this thing off now. Should be able to get that wire free. And that's what's holding us up. And now really all it is a matter of getting these lug nuts off and pulling the slide hammer off. All right, guys, here is our new hub assembly. It is a Moog assembly, as I mentioned. They are the same for both sides. The process is the same, as is the part, and the part number is 515065. All right, so here is the new hub. As I mentioned, it does come with the harness for the ABS for the wheel speed sensor. So there we go, guys, full hub, brand new, ready to go. Let's get this thing installed. All right, guys, back here at the knuckle. So I did brake clean this really quick and just wiped out the, circle where this is going to go. And right here, if you like, you could take some red Scotch Brite or something to work some of this rust off. If it makes you feel better, you could put anti-seize in it. A couple of different things you can do. I just cleaned it up, you know, as best as I could real quick with some brake cleaner and a paper towel, and we're going to go ahead and get this thing back together. So if you look at the old hub right here, this thing did have the dust shield around it. So we're going to do here is get this fed back through with the new harness. All right, so get that going. We're going to put that right back essentially where she belongs. You can see this thing line up here. Get this harness out of the way. And there we go. So that's how it's going to go. So let me go ahead and get the hub, and then we're going to get this thing started. All right, so I got the hub in my hand. I'm just going to slide it over. I'm not too concerned with this dust shield falling all over the place at the moment, because what I'm going to try to accomplish here is get those splines started, which I just did. And now that I got those splines started, I'm just going to take the axle nut here, and we're just going to lightly get that threaded on the end to hold it in place. All right, so now we're not fighting with this thing falling on us all the whole time, and we can, you know, all but orientate this and get it kind of back aligned and in place where it needs to be. So if you remember, the speed sensor harness is right here. You do got to get that wire fed through nicely like this. All right, so it's got nice little heat shields on there too. It's really nice. Go ahead, Moog, I see you. All right, so now we got that started. We can see how I fed that back in there. We just have to feed this back in with the dust shield, align it all together like this. We'll go ahead and get this axle nut probably going a little more, and then I'm going to go ahead and get these bolts started. So what I'm going to do is get the axle nut, you know, almost snug, maybe like, you know, a hair away from snug, and then we're going to go ahead and get these bolts set up and in, and then we'll get everything set up and torque to spec, guys. So let me go ahead and get that axle nut snug. All right, so I'm going to snug this axle nut down. All right, that's good. And now it's on the axle. It's going to prevent it from moving all around on the axle itself, and it'll give me a little bit more stability here in order to get this lined up and in and installed correctly. Okay, so I just got to get this thing pushed into the knuckle basically, and then it'll allow me to align everything accordingly. So let's go ahead and get that done. All right, so I got this just about aligned. It's not perfect. I can make a couple adjustments if I need to. It's not really that hard. You can still have a little bit of free play and move this thing around, but it is in the knuckle. It's all but flush. We just have to get the 4 17 mils back in. So what I want to do is turn the wheel. So I'm going to turn the wheel back this way. We're going to start these and just basically do the reverse of removal and get all 4 of these in and torque to spec, guys. So let's get these bolts in. All right, guys, so wheel turned. I just took a socket with one of our 17s and I just eyeballed it, and it was about aligned, and as you can see, she is coming through. So it's about to show us its face there in a second, and there we go. So I got that one started. I'm gonna go caddy corner and start the lower one down here, and then we'll get all 4 started, and then we'll worry about getting them tightened up. All right, guys, we're working on this bottom one now. I got it started. So just gonna have it grab a few threads, which I got. So I don't know if you can see, that thing is started. So now that I got our 2 caddy corner bolts started, I'll get our other 2 diagonal bolts started, and then we'll get these tightened up. All right, guys, I got all 4 of these started now. So there's our bottom one right here. It's gonna be coming through right there. So what I want to do is get all 4 of these finger tight here. So just get them as tight as I can by hand, by you know, threaded it in just like that. You can see that one coming through. We'll get all 4 of these threaded in by hand with the socket, and then we're going to torque all 4 of these bolts to spec. All right, guys, so we got all 4 of those locked in, finger tight. They're just going to need our final torque now. So we're going to go ahead and torque these 4 17mm hub bolts to spec. So here is the blowout from the factory service manual from Nissan. And as you can see, the torque spec for these 4 17 mil hub bolts is 44 foot-pounds. Okay, so I have my torque wrench here locked in, 44 foot-pounds. Go ahead and get on this top one hopefully first. My torque wrench is rather large, so see if I can sneak her in here. And that's why you can move the wheel. So I turned it, I actually got a little bit of free play, move the wheel, and now I can get in here, guys. So let's go ahead and get this thing locked in, guys. So 44 foot-pounds, nothing too crazy. There we go, locked in. So I'm gonna go back down diagonal from here to down here. We'll get that one, come back up here, and then come back and get the bottom one in, you know, crisscross pattern. So let's go ahead and get that done now. All right, so we're at the opposing one that we just did. Let's get this one locked in here on the opposite end. Yep, 44. We're gonna come up to this one here. Locked in. Turn the wheel. I just left the ignition on so I can just do this manually, so I don't have to be messing around with hopping in and out of the car. Turn it off after I'm done, but you need that play to get behind these accurately. So we're coming to the bottom one here for our final torque on our last and 4th bolt here on the hub. There it is, guys. All 4 now locked into 44 foot-pounds. So all of our 17 mils on the hub are locked in. Hub is all but installed. So let's keep on reassembling. All right, guys, next thing here is we're gonna go ahead and get our axle nut locked in. Okay, so the axle nut is 101 foot-pounds. If you want to torque it, go for it. I'm just going to snug it back in with the impact once it on the tight setting once it gets tight. So let's go ahead and get that locked in. Remember, it's a 32 mil, and that's more than enough, guys. That should be perfectly fine, good to go. If you want to torque it, like I said, 101 foot-pounds is the torque spec. Okay, so now that we got that done, we just need to throw our cotter pin back in and our axle nut will be completely done. All right, guys, we're just going to put our cotter pin back in. I'm going to reuse the OEM one that was in here. I did not chew it all up, so I got it out relatively easily. I just figured I'll use it again. So what I'm going to do is just take some snips here, and I'm just going to bend this thing back basically into the position that it was. Right, and there we go. I think should be all but good. Cotter pin locked in perfectly right around our axle nut. So axle nut in, cotter pin in, this is good to go. Our whole hub is fully installed now. Now all we got to do is reinstall the braking system essentially and get our wire plugged back up, and we are good to go. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get our wire ran again. So since it's hanging here on the ground, it's not the most eye appealing thing, so might as well just go ahead and get it put back together out of harm's way, you know what I mean? And this wire is actually really nice. I like the heat shrink and stuff on it. It's really cool. All right, so we got that fed through there. So we got our rubber grommets here that are just going to fall in line accordingly. We just got to press them back in. So there's one, and we got this one. It's going to come down over the bracket like this into the second one here. And am I in it? There we go. All right, so there is that one. Come up to this one right here. All right, so we'll get that one in. Okay, so wire is routed in the rubber grommets. Come back here to the harness, and it actually has a new oh, we might have got some grime on here. Ew, I'm not sure what that's from, but it has a new thing on here. So I want to pop the old one out, and then we'll press this in, and we'll have a new harness here ready to go. All right, guys, so since this has a new retainer clamp here, I'm just going to work this one out with a panel popper. Should be able to get it to come out here. Should being the key word. There it goes. She is out. So just pop that thing on out. So what we're going to do is plug this bad boy up accordingly. All right, got that plugged in, and all we got to do is press this thing back into its two holes. There it is, guys. She is in place, locked into its tabs, good to go. All right, guys, so time for the brake system reassembly, and then this job is done. We have the hub and everything associated with it back installed, torque to spec. So got the rotor here. Go ahead and slide this back over. All right, our brand new studs there. And what I'm going to do is grab a lug nut, and what we're going to do is seat that home to hold the rotor tight in place so it doesn't flex on us while we're reassembling everything and putting it back together. All right, guys, so basically from here on out, it's just a brake job. So we've got our bracket here. First thing you want to do is, since you're in here, you might as well check everything. So make sure your slide pins have play. I think I'm going to put a little bit of lubricant on these, even though they do have some pretty good play. Well, that one did, this one does not. So if you can see, this thing is pretty frozen in here. All right, I can't get it to move at all, actually. So I'm gonna have to fix that, and that way we'll you know, get some free play in this, because both of these should be moving freely like this, not frozen. So we'll get that solved, and I'll show you what we're gonna do. All right, guys, so since we got this frozen pin, just moving it around with the impact. It is a 17 mil, so if you have this issue, 17 mil. All right, so I think I got that moving pretty freely. So what I'm going to try to do is pull this out now while I'm impacting it. So I might have to put a pry bar or something like that in this to escort it out while I'm spinning it, but basically you just want it to be spinning and you want to pull it out. So let's get this thing out. All right, guys, this thing fought me long and hard, but we got it off. And the reason this was stuck is because this rubber boot was swollen really bad. You could get new hardware that has this on there. If it's, you know, in the pinch, you can take this off. I mean, this really doesn't serve much purpose. You know, I'm going to take it off. It's going to be way better and function how it's supposed to without it than it would with this on here. Most of the time on all these Nissans that have this, they get swollen up over time and they become problematic like this, and the brakes aren't functioning as they should. So really, at the end of the day, the cars are going to function and brake better without this rubber boot on here, because this is what causes these caliper brackets to seize. So we're going to cut this thing off. I'm going to put caliper slide pin grease on both of these. We're going to grease them up really good and get them back installed so they actually have free play, and then we'll get this reassembled. All right, guys, so I got both of these cleaned up here. All right, just brake cleaned them and cut that rubber boot off. All right, so now what I have here is some Permatex Ultra Disc brake caliper lube. Okay, so what I want to do is take a little bit of this. There's actually a ton of it on the end of it here, but just has a little brush on it. So what we're going to do is get one of these pins covered up here real nice, and some fresh grease and lubricant. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and press this bad boy back in. Make sure that boot goes around it. I will press that on there, but that's good. You just want to get all that new fresh grease in there, get that boot pressed on, and we're good to go. I'll get the other one in and we'll have fresh movable slide pins in our bracket. All right, so both of our slide pins are moving freely. Got the boots back on, just spin them. Make sure you get that worked in there really nice. All right, so good to go, guys. Movable slide pins. Let's get this bracket back on. All right, guys, we're gonna go ahead and get our brake caliper bracket back on. So we're gonna slide it right over our rotor. I'm gonna grab one of our 19 mils here. I'm gonna start the top bolt here. Just want to get it to grab and start, and then once that starts, like I got it right there, I'll get the bottom one going as well. So that bottom one started. All right, so both of our 19 mils are good. So now that I have both of these started, I'm going to get both of these finger tight, and then we're going to torque both of them to spec. All right, so bracket is finger tight, so we're going to go ahead and torque these 19 mil caliper bracket bolts to spec. So the torque spec for these 19 mil bolts is 136 foot-pounds. Okay, so here's the blowout from the Nissan factory service manual. 136 foot-pounds. Let's go ahead and get these bad boys locked in. I'm gonna go ahead and start with this top one. So 19 mil, 136. All right, that one's locked in. Let's get this bottom one. there it is, guys. 136 foot-pounds on both of our 19 mil bracket bolts. That's all torque to spec. All right, so now we just have to get our pads back in. So upon the disassembly of this, our hardware shims came out. So I'm just gonna have to put these back in. Yours might still be installed if you didn't have to mess with the bracket as much as I did. But if not, you just simply pop them back in. You can see that they go right around the rotor and fit into the bracket perfectly. I suggest reusing OEM shims. They usually fit better than aftermarket BS that comes with most brake kits. So I prefer OEM, even though it might be dirty and brown and rusty. I bet it fits better than that shiny one that you got in your package. All right, so there we go, guys. They are in. So now it's just a matter of getting our pads in. Now, if you're reusing the same pads, which you know I am, these are in pretty good shape. You can see which side was which. This is where the pistons were. That is our back side. You can see that that has the outlines from the front of the caliper, so we know which side was which. We're just going to put them back accordingly. What I like to do anytime I do a brake job or disassemble brakes is use a little bit of brake component lubricant, just to make sure that we don't get any you know, screeches or anything like that, and put them on the contact points where the pads meet the hardware. Okay, so just got to get a little bit on each end, just like that. We'll work it on. Okay, nothing crazy, just a little bit. This side's got a little bit more than I wanted to. Put some of that over here. There we go. All right, so this is good. This is our front pad. You can tell by looking at it. And I'll go ahead and get this thing snuck in here, and then we will be good to go. There we go. Pads installed, good to go. Just got to get that back one installed same way, and then we'll have our pads in. All right, guys, now we have the pads in, but we do have to put these beautiful retaining clamps that they decided to utilize in this setup back on as well. So what I'm going to do is get our caliper in position. So just put it on right when I have it set up with those clamps in there, or these clips, whatever you want to call them. But go ahead and get one in on each side. And if you want, you could also put some brake component lubricant here on the piston and on the inner parts. So I usually typically like to do that as well. There's actually a little remnants of when I put it on when I did this brake job on this vehicle, like, I don't know, maybe 9-10 months ago. So I'm just going to leave it. We're good to go as far as that's concerned, and that shows that it actually lasts. It's worth doing, because here we are almost a year later and that's still holding its ground. All right, so this is the fun part. Make sure that your brake hose is not all tangled up. So mine was, so I got to turn it back the other way. You kind of want to hold them together. See, I'm holding them together while I slide it over to hold it, and then you can work your caliper back on. Okay, so I'm a little high here. Let me get this thing a hair lower. There we go. All right, so got that on, and all we have to do now is take our 14mm caliper bolts, get these back aligned up with our caliper slide pins, get them started. All right, get that bottom one started, and what I want to do is get these finger tight, and then we're going to torque them to spec. All right, guys, so got both of our 14 mils finger tight here. So our caliper 14mm bolts are finger tight, so we're going to go ahead and torque them to spec. So here is the blowout from the Nissan factory service manual. All right, now as we can see, they are 20 foot-pounds. So 14 mil locked in, 20 foot-pounds. Let's get these clicked in and snugged home. There's one. All right, let's get this bottom one here. There we go, guys. Locked in. So both of our 14 mils now torqued to 20 foot-pounds. Everything here is torqued to spec, fully reassembled. You can give the wheel a little spin. Make sure you don't hear anything. Shouldn't hear any scraping, anything crazy. I don't hear anything. So I hope this helped with doing the front wheel hub on your 3rd gen Nissan Pathfinder. Make sure you stay tuned, because you never know when I might be wrenching on this thing again. And until next time, guys.